When firefighters arrived at a small yogurt shop in Austin on December 6, 1991, they thought they were responding to a routine fire. But inside the building, they discovered something horrifying. 4 teenage girls tied together in the back room. And more than 30 years later, the people responsible may still be free. It was a cold Friday night in Austin, and for most people, the evening was ordinary. Families were at home, restaurants were closing, and teenagers across the city were finishing their shifts at part-time jobs. At a small frozen yogurt shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, 4 young girls were working the late shift. For them, it was supposed to be a normal night. Serve the last customers, clean the store, lock up, and go home. But before midnight arrived, something unimaginable would happen inside that shop. A crime so brutal that it would shock an entire city and remain one of the most haunting, unsolved cases in Texas history. This is the story of the yogurt shop murders. The 4 girls working that night were young, full of life, and just beginning their futures. The youngest was Amy Ayers. Amy was only 13 years old. She had recently started working at the yogurt shop and was excited about earning her own money. Friends described her as cheerful and energetic, someone who always had a smile on her face. Working alongside her was 15-year-old Sarah Harbison. Sarah was responsible and kind. She often helped the younger employees and made sure things ran smoothly during their shifts. Also working that night was Sarah's older sister, Jennifer Harbison, who was 17. Jennifer was known for her outgoing personality and her plans for the future. Like many teenagers, she had dreams of college, travel, and the life ahead of her. The 4th employee was Eliza Thomas, also 17 years old. Eliza loved music and art, and her friends described her as thoughtful and creative. None of the girls could have imagined the danger that was about to enter their workplace. That evening, the yogurt shop looked like it always did. Customers came in for dessert, ordered frozen yogurt, and sat at the small tables chatting with friends. The girls worked behind the counter, laughing and talking as they served customers. As the night went on, the crowd slowly disappeared. By around 10:30 p.m., the shop had grown quiet. The girls began preparing to close the store. They cleaned the tables, counted the register, and started their usual closing routine. But sometime during those final moments, several men entered the shop. Investigators later believed the attackers forced the girls into the back area of the store. What happened next would become one of the most horrifying crimes in the city's history. Evidence later revealed that the girls had been tied up and restrained. The attackers kept them trapped inside the building. The violence that followed was brutal and terrifying. Investigators believe the girls were assaulted and murdered before the attackers attempted to destroy the evidence. In an effort to cover up their crime, the killers set the building on fire. Flames quickly spread through the yogurt shop. Smoke began pouring out into the night sky. But the fire would not hide what had already happened. At around 11:30 p.m., firefighters were called to the scene. They arrived expecting a routine building fire. But once they entered the store, they realized something was terribly wrong. Inside the back room, they discovered the bodies of the 4 girls. The scene was devastating. Firefighters and police officers were shaken by what they found. Word of the crime spread quickly across Austin. By the next morning, the entire city was in shock. Parents across the community struggled to understand how something so terrible could happen in a place that had always felt safe. Police immediately launched a massive investigation. Detectives from the Austin Police Department began interviewing witnesses and collecting evidence. But the fire had destroyed much of the crime scene. Important clues had been lost in the flames. Investigators spoke with hundreds of people, searching for anyone who might have seen something suspicious that night. Several witnesses reported seeing unknown men near the yogurt shop, but the descriptions were vague. Without clear evidence, the investigation became extremely difficult. Despite the intense effort, weeks passed with no arrests. The murders left the city in fear. Parents became more protective of their children, businesses began increasing security. Teenagers who once worked late shifts were suddenly being picked up early by worried families. The case dominated the news for months, but as the years passed, leads began to disappear. The investigation slowly turned into a cold case. Then, in 1999, nearly 8 years after the murders, investigators believed they had finally found the suspects. Police arrested 4 men. They were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Forrest Wellborn, and Maurice Pierce. During interrogations, 2 of the suspects gave confessions. Investigators believed the crime had started as a robbery that spiraled out of control. For many people in Austin, it seemed like justice might finally come. But the case was far from over. Defense attorneys soon challenged the confessions. They argued that the suspects had been pressured during long interrogations. Some details in the confessions did not match the physical evidence from the crime scene. Years later, advances in DNA testing would change everything. When forensic evidence from the crime scene was tested, the results did not match the men who had been convicted. Because of this, the convictions were overturned. The suspects were eventually released, and once again, the case returned to being unsolved. More than 3 decades later, the yogurt shop murders remain one of the most disturbing, unsolved crimes in the United States. Investigators still believe multiple attackers were involved. Some detectives suspect that someone out there knows the truth, but has never come forward. The case remains open, and the families of the victims are still waiting for answers. Amy Ayers, Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, Eliza Thomas. 4 young lives taken far too soon. Their story continues to haunt the city of Austin. And somewhere out there, the person responsible may still be living with the secret of what happened inside that yogurt shop on that cold December night. Until the truth is discovered, the yogurt shop murders remain a mystery that refuses to be forgotten.